Hello, this is everybody. Here comes everybody. And I thought I got all my Finnegans Wake materials out the other day, and I thought I would just make a pretty short video here sharing what I have found to be the most helpful secondary materials on Finnegans Wake. Also the editions of Finnegans Wake that I have used the most. So yeah, I'm going to keep this relatively short video and just go through them relatively quickly. If you want any more detail on any of this stuff, just feel free to ask. So I have a variety of editions of Finnegans Wake. Now, the default editions are perfectly fine. Like this is one of the classic ones. It has more apparatus to it. It's funny, I just read In the Penal Colony with my students today. So apparatus has a very specific meaning to it to me right now. But yeah, this is a classic Penguin Teal modern classics. That's a classic edition to go to. John Bishop has I believe the foreword to that. My go-to reading copy, getting over another illness here, Joyce being a teacher. My go-to copy is this one that I found locally that just so happens to be from, inevitably the modern incarnation of Shakespeare and Company in Paris. So, but yeah, it's just a nice, cheap paperback, easily portable. I kind of like the picture on the front here. Faber and Faber, who, published it first back in 1939. And so yeah, this is if I'm carrying around an edition, this has been the one lately. Just if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And then so those editions obviously are easy to come by. Anyone can get them. There is one edition of Finnegans Wake that is expensive now because it's out of print, and I think some weird stuff happened with rights or whatever. And but I do think it is worth getting your hands on if you can find it and if you can afford it. At the lowest, and I've shared a couple volumes at this price range on my Discord. I've seen it go between $60 to $100. And the book I'm talking about is this restored Finnegans Wake. Hardcover edition. Originally it went for 30 UK, 45 Canadian. And for some reason, and I haven't pinpointed it, I haven't thought about it enough to really figure it out, but something has always rubbed me the wrong way about the Gabler edition of Ulysses. And I don't even own a copy. I just don't like reading it. I prefer either my favorite edition of Ulysses to read is the Oxford, basically the reprint of the 1922 edition with all the mistakes and everything. That's the default that I like to read. And this Finnegans Wake is kind of like a Gabler for Finnegans Wake, but I think Finnegans Wake didn't have nearly as many errors, so it's not really changing a whole lot, percentage-wise of the book. But there is just something about this edition that I feel like when I read it, it's clearer to me. Like, I have more sparks flying, you could say. Again, I don't know what it is, but I would recommend, if you can get a hold of it, Penguin Classics, Restored Finnegans Wake. So keep an eye out for that. All right. And then the defaults, you have to have them, secondary materials are, firstly, and this is what I'd say, if you don't have this and you want to read Finnegans Wake, what are you doing with your life? Annotations to Finnegans Wake. And you do not want to get more recent than the 3rd edition. The 4th edition is pixelated as hell, cheaply made, but it costs, a lot more. This is by Johns Hopkins. And yeah, like I said, you don't want to go more recent than the third edition, at least last time I checked. And it's been a few years, but I can't imagine it's better. But yeah, Roland McHugh, Finnegans Wake scholar. Um, yeah, it's just it's really fun because one thing I like about this is that it doesn't imply that any of these annotations are definitive. It just gives all the options that they found. And then, of course, any reader who really gets into Finnegans Wake is going to have their own to add, and you could add your own as well. So if you're like me and you don't like secondary materials, I do think, though, Finnegans Wake is a book that warrants them. Most books don't. You know, like Divine Comedy warrants them, Finnegans Wake and Virgil and all this. But anyway, if you're only going to get one, get this. If you're going to get two, partially for the historical value, but also it's a good intro, Skeleton Key to Finnegans Wake, Joseph Campbell and Henry Morton Robinson. And it just so happens that my particular one was printed during World War II, which I think gives a particular poignancy to it. A wartime book, 1944, B10, 1944. So I think this must be the second printing. But yeah, this one I just skimmed through. I really don't treat it with too much, reverence or, in the end, authority. But it's just nice to get a perspective on it. And then couple others that are a bit deeper, where these are the ones that you'll know if you look into Finnegans Wake. One that I did not get out, which is kind of in the middle ground, is the Finnegans Wake James Symposium, the examination of our factification, Samuel Beckett and Eugene Jolas and these different figures who, the first printings through like Transition and whoever else was putting out Finnegans Wake, there were some poor reviews coming out, just straight Philistines, to the core. And and I think it was 1929, they roused the troops and got some actually interesting and insightful reviews and comments, but William Carlos Williams was one of them. So that's one I would also put in this like first layer category. If you want to go a little deeper, I have to make a note, because like Finnegans Wake heads, I think, will be surprised to find I don't have Joyce's Book of the Dark by John Bishop. Now, I have read parts of it. I have sampled it. I would say sampled it pretty thoroughly, and it just didn't connect with me. It's not, at least now, I've been reading Finnegans Wake, I don't know, seriously for maybe 8 years. It doesn't capture how I like to read Finnegans Wake. So that's why it's not on the list. A couple things I do think are extremely helpful. How Joyce Wrote Finnegans Wake, a genetic guide. And this is Luca Crispy and Sam Sloat. Sam Sloat is like major Joyce scholar. Sam Sloat was deeply involved in the Annotations to Ulysses, the new one that was published for the centenary, that is now in paperback. So yeah, take a look at that if you didn't want to pay $150 for it. But yeah, Roland McHugh's even on the back. The most complete and accurate account to date of the composition of Joyce's greatest work. So this, I would say, is a must-have if you're really getting into the weeds. Partially for seeing what Joyce was interested in at each moment and what he was talking to other people about as, over the 17 years it was modified. And then something that, again, is kind of a deeper layer, but I think is vital, is a first draft version of Finnegans Wake by Heyman. This is University of Texas Press from 1963. So pretty old. I don't know if it's been reprinted. Wait, I think it's public domain somehow, or like there's like a bootleg reprint, but you know, I was able to find a pretty cheap copy of the or I don't know, first edition, whatever, but an old copy. And what's nice about this is that this is kind of an intermediary of that, how Joyce wrote Finnegans Wake, because this has versions of all of the like canonical sections of Finnegans Wake as it was being worked on, especially in the early years. It has the classic beginning, and then it has Anna Livia Pluribel, Tristan and Isolde, Mama Lujo section. Has diagrams, plans for book 2, and just other different materials. The Scribbledy Hobble, this famous notebook that Joyce worked on in his early years of drafting Finnegans Wake. But as you can see, it replicates what his notebooks would have looked like. So it has, you know, cross outs and other word choices for different things. So highly recommended if you can get a hold of this one. And then one that I don't know necessarily if anyone else would recommend, but I think is vital. Like, in my opinion, how I understand Finnegans Wake, you can't without this layer of understanding. And I'm using this book kind of as a not placeholder, symbolic edition, and that is Dictionary of Indo-European Roots by Calvert Watkins. And the reason why I think a book like this is so valuable is because a book like this allows you to see the deep, deep interconnections between languages that on the surface seem so different. I tell my students, 6,000 years ago, English and Spanish were the same language. And then over time, obviously, they deviated for geographical and so on and so on. But what this book specifically does, but other books, that Calvert Watkins also wrote How to Kill a Dragon. M.L. West has a really good book, Indo-European Poetics and Myth, or Poetry and Myth. Why I think these are so vital is that what Joyce is doing is fundamentally the kind of thing that these linguists allowed us to do by their realizations of the deep interconnections of languages. And Joyce is removing false boundaries from concepts, historical concepts, symbolic concepts, linguistic concepts, and I think allowing the reader to reconstruct them in a more true way, a mythologically true sense. And so I think, anyone who doesn't get into at least some kind of linguistics, historical comparative linguistics, is limiting their understanding of Finnegans Wake. And, the last thing before I go, I also think, like Finnegans Wake, you can't understand it fully without reading Joyce's other work, Dubliners, Portrait of the Artist, Ulysses, and then Finnegans Wake. I think that's just absolutely vital. I also think listening to Irish folk music is extremely important. Finnegans Wake is, of course, an Irish pub song, almost certainly written in, well, that's too strongly. I don't remember anymore specifically, but it was probably written in America and then, backdrafted to the homeland. And there's a lot of music like that, but Irish folk music is just an amazing, deep tradition. And my personal next layer, if you want the deep cut, so to say, I think that's what the kids say, I am getting into the mythological cycle of Irish historical myth, the Ulster cycle, the Fenian cycle, and then the Annals of the Four Masters. That is what I'm getting into next. That's my next layer that I'm adding on. So anyway, if you feel like I missed one and you want to advocate for it, please let me know. And yeah, hopefully you enjoy reading Finnegans Wake as I do. It's one of my lifetime books. Yeah. All right. Well, death is a gang boss.